President Trump and North Korea's Chairman Kim Jong-un are now long gone from Singapore after a whirlwind summit that set lofty goals but provided few specifics on how to achieve them. Late this afternoon, early morning in Pyongyang, a North Korean news agency issued statements from leader Kim. He said the summit had produced a, quote, radical switch in the relationship, and he called for practical measures to follow through on issues at an early date. From Singapore, Foreign Affairs correspondent Nick Schifrin again begins our coverage.
For decades, the leader of one of the world's most isolated and repressive regimes has wanted this handshake. And with the U.S.-North Korean flag side by side, President Trump greeted Kim Jong-un with the trappings of pomp and prestige and started a process he predicted would end decades of atomic antagonism. Just 5 months ago, the two men taunted each other by touting the sizes of their nuclear arsenals. Today, they spent 5 hours together, and President Trump predicted this was the start of a beautiful friendship.
It's my honor, and we will have a terrific relationship, I have no doubt.
We overcame all kinds of skepticism and speculations about this summit, and I believe this is a good prelude for peace.
Thank you very much.
After an expanded bilateral meeting of the two sides' senior aides,
getting a good picture, everybody, so we look nice and handsome and thin.
And a working lunch of short-rib crispy pork and braised cod,
Okay.
the two signed a joint statement that President Trump and Kim Jong-un said would transform their relationship.
Today, we had a historic meeting and decided to leave the past behind.
In the statement, the U.S. pledges security guarantees to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK, and Kim Jong-un reaffirmed his firm and unwavering commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. The document is more of an outline than a roadmap. Both sides pledged, without specifics, to establish new relations, seek peace on the peninsula, work toward complete denuclearization, and recover POW MIA remains from the Korean War.
The past does not have to define the future. Yesterday's conflict does not have to be tomorrow's war.
For months, the administration said it would demand the North Korean nuclear program dismantle completely, verifiably, and irreversibly. But today's agreement does not require North Korea to do anything specific. And for the first time, President Trump admitted instant denuclearization was impossible.
It does take a long time to, pull off complete denuclearization. It takes a long time.
But what President Trump wants quickly, the end of joint U.S.-South Korean military exercises. For decades, the military has described these drills as defensive and symbols of support for South Korea. But President Trump called them inappropriate and expensive war games.
We fly in bombers from Guam. 6.5 hours, that's a long time for these big, massive planes to be flying to South Korea to practice and then drop bombs all over the place and then go back to Guam. I know a lot about airplanes. It's very expensive. And I think it's very provocative.
After Mr. Trump spoke, the South Korean military appeared to be surprised, releasing a statement that read in part, "We need to find out the exact meaning or intention behind his comments at this point." But South Korean President Moon Jae-in, whose diplomacy helped create the summit, was supportive, said his spokesman.
I congratulate and welcome the success of the historic North Korea-U.S. summit with a burning heart.
President Trump described how he one day wanted to lift sanctions on longtime adversary North Korea, and he envisioned an optimistic future for North Korea's tiny economy.
As an example, they have great beaches. You see that whenever they're exploding their cannons into the ocean, right? So I said, boy, look at that beach. Wouldn't that make a great condo behind? And I explained, I said, instead of doing that, you could have the best hotels in the world right there. Think of it from a real estate perspective.
President Trump's positivity comes despite North Korea's long and brutal human rights record. North Korea is accused of starving its own people and creating widespread malnourishment. Kim is accused of killing his own uncle to consolidate power. But President Trump, who is more than twice Kim's age, suggested his rapport with the dictator could overcome decades of mistrust.
Well, he is very talented. Anybody that takes over a situation like he did at 26 years of age and is able to run it and run it tough. I don't say he was nice or I don't say anything about it. He ran it. Very few people at that age, you can take 1 out of 10,000 probably couldn't do it.
Kim has never been exposed to this kind of environment as North Korea's leader. And at one point during the summit, he said it felt so foreign, it was like a science fiction movie. But Judy, the fact is he leaves this summit with very real achievements. Not only the prestige of meeting with the President of the United States, but also the President's announcement that major military exercises would freeze.
So, Nick, what about the joint agreement? Is it fair to say the North Koreans got what they wanted out of that as well?
Yeah, that's certainly what the analysts that we are talking to are telling us, that the North Koreans did get what they want. And this is critical because this is about what happens next. So when Kim left North Korea, the press releases that came out of the North Korean media said that the priorities were in this order. 1, improve relations with the U.S. 2, gain peace on the peninsula. And 3, and only 3, denuclearization. That's the exact order from the joint statement. Improve relations, peace on the peninsula, and denuclearization. And that's a flip from what the U.S. is usually willing to do. The U.S. usually says denuclearize first, and then we can talk about the other things. And so by allowing that flip, the U.S. effectively is accepting the North Korean narrative that in order to achieve denuclearization, these other things need to happen at the same time or even before. And that's the question. Will North Korea insist that relations need to improve, that there needs to be peace on the peninsula before denuclearization? Or can all of this happen in parallel, which of course is what the U.S. wants? And that will be difficult, Judy, given that this agreement has not a single shred of enforcement that's part of it.
Well, speaking of that, Nick, there's been some criticism of President Trump of the U.S. side for not getting enough out of the agreement. And President Trump was just tweeting about that.
Yeah, he sent a tweet just before we went on the air tonight and also answered practically a dozen questions from all of us today about this. And he defended himself. He said, look, all of you people who are writing that I gave up too much, that's wrong. And he listed his achievements in his words. 1, hostages that were released a few weeks ago are now in the U.S. 2, the remains of what he called great heroes, the POWs, MIAs, are going to be coming home. 3, a missile freeze, a nuclear test freeze. We haven't seen the test that we saw last year. And number 4, the beginning of a relationship. And that was really the goal at the end of the day, with lowered expectations, to achieve this relationship and start a process for the U.S. The flip of that, of course, is that the North Koreans achieved not only the prestige of meeting with the president, not only this freeze of major military exercises, but also we're also seeing the erosion of the sanctions campaign, the erosion of the pressure on North Korea, on the Chinese-North Korean border, on the Russian-North Korean border. The pressure that the Trump administration helped build is beginning to ease, and that is another achievement that North Korea gains from this summit.
And so, Nick, quickly on another note, we were talking about a lot of pageantry at this summit, and you were just telling us that extended to President Trump's final news conference.
Yeah, we walked in and we saw on these TV screens this video, highly produced with a narration, and it basically offered Kim a choice: shake the hand of peace or slide back into more isolation. And the president said that he presented this video on an iPad to the North Korean delegation to try and convince them to sign the joint agreement. This is obviously slightly unusual diplomacy, and the question is whether this unusual diplomacy works. And the president does like surprises. He also announced that the North Koreans promised to eliminate a missile engine testing site. And it just shows, Judy, that the style of surprise is part of the substance of how the president negotiates.
Nick Schifrin reporting for us from Singapore. Thank you, Nick. Here in Washington, reaction to the summit so far is decidedly mixed. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer charged today it may have been, quote, purely a reality show summit. Fellow Democrat Ed Markey of Massachusetts said it is the weakest agreement that North Korea has ever signed. And Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey said Kim Jong-un is the clear winner.
We had a lot of sizzle here, but not a lot of steak. Kim Jong-un had a good summit. At the end of the day, he went from international pariah, scorned by the world, with multilateral sanctions, including those of the United Nations, to being seen as an equal, meeting with the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, on an equal footing.
For their part, Senate Republicans said Mr. Trump sounded upbeat in a phone call to their weekly luncheon, but they also counseled caution. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the summit, quote, a major first step, but not decisive. House Speaker Paul Ryan pressed for a verifiable end to North Korea's nuclear program, as did South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham.
The statement issued is a statement in principle. They will give up their nuclear weapons program. In return, we will guarantee their security and provide economic prosperity in North Korea. That's a good deal for everybody. We're a long ways from there, but I appreciate the fact that the president was willing to sit down, and we'll see what happens.
We'll talk to leading senators from both parties right after the news summary.